as a Palestinian, you can't just be a journalist. The title, the name that you are a Palestinian, means that you are viewed as a political entity.
And this has been one of the problems with Western media coverage, a lot of the outlets, is when the journalism is presented that's done by these Palestinian journalists, it's always done, or it's always presented with a caveat. There's always a caveat. It's never like taken at face value for what it is.
I agree with that. An example is when Shireen Abu Akleh was killed, there were 5 other journalists who were with her. And immediately after her death, the 5 other journalists, who are eyewitnesses
Yes.
and journalists, came out and said she was targeted by the Israeli military. She was killed by the Israeli military. We saw the tank over here. This is the series of events that took place. And yet, that wasn't enough in terms of sources to be able to say at the beginning that Shireen Abu Akleh was killed by the Israeli military. I don't know if you remember, but at the time when Shireen Abu Akleh was first killed, there were all these reports online, the same thing that always happens. Oh, it
Palestinian
wasn't.
armed groups.
Yeah, it was armed groups that were around. Armed groups accidentally killed her.
Yeah.
It wasn't the Israeli military. It was, misinformation, disinformation that was just put out into the social sphere, and it basically meant that at the beginning, during the initial reporting, it wasn't said explicitly Shireen Abu Akleh was killed by the Israeli military. And instead, you had this situation where it was a journalist died. Shireen Abu Akleh was killed, but it doesn't say who killed her.
Right, the language.
Right. But there were 5 journalists with her, and they all came out and they gave their series of events that took place, which suggested that it was the Israeli military that killed her. But that wasn't enough. Their sources, 5 journalists, I couldn't think of anywhere else in the world. If you had 5 journalists from that place who all gave information, normally as a journalist, you need to corroborate the story with, 2 sources, 3 sources. This is many people who work for, news organizations. But why is that? Why is it that those Palestinian journalists were not enough? Why are they not enough?
Does it go back to the whole idea of them being political, like you said earlier?
Absolutely. It's because as a Palestinian, you can't just be a journalist. The title, the name that you are a Palestinian, means that you are viewed as a political entity.